A lot of fights went down this past weekend. Juan Francisco Estrada, Andy Ruiz, Rayo Valenzuela, PitBull Cruz. Let's talk about all of it. Roll that beautiful bean footage.
I hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Hey, what's up with it, fam? It's Hot Boxing Minute, your favorite pharmaceutical engineer turned boxing analyst, back at you with the what? The realness. I like that. Like it does something. The realness. There was a lot of fights going on this weekend, so I'm going to try to cover as many of the big fights that went down. First things first, let's talk about that DAZN fight card out there in Hermosillo, Mexico. They had Juan Francisco Estrada headlining a fight against the very game Arhi Cortez. It went the full distance. It was a 12-rounder, and it was an action-packed 12-rounder. Arhi Cortez did so much better than I think a lot of the boxing world thought he was going to do. Prior to that fight, he had just started going, I think, 10-round fights. Just a year ago, he was doing 6-rounders. So I think most people in the boxing world didn't really know who Arhi Cortez was. I certainly didn't. We all, I think, know who Juan Francisco Estrada is, assuming you keep attention or pay attention to the boxing world. It was a fun fight. The Juan Francisco Estrada got to make his comeback to the ring. I think he's been out of the ring for like a year at least. And prior to his last fight, his last big fight, which was against Chocolatito, he had fought two much lesser named opponents. And he fought Arhi Cortez, who was trained under Nacho Beristain, and they gave us an awesome fight. It seemed like in the early part of the fight, Arhi Cortez had his number. But, you know, Juan Francisco Estrada, in a true veteran fashion, ended up getting his wits about him, relied on his experience, and ended up starting to take momentum of the fight. I think it started with a 7th round, knockdown with a left hook body shot, if I'm not mistaken, to Arhi Cortez in the 7th round. That kind of gave, Gallito El Gallo the confidence he needed to take control of the fight once again. But regardless, the entire fight was massively competitive. Juan Francisco Estrada, by beating Arhi Cortez, opens up that door for that trilogy fight with Chocolatito. Now, we did see a little bit of, decline in Juan Francisco Estrada's... Okay, so here's the question. So Juan Francisco Estrada beats Arhi Cortez in a 12-round unanimous decision fight, thus setting up a trilogy fight with Chocolatito. Now, in that fight with Gallo, it did look like he was getting hit pretty easily by Arhi Cortez through different sequences of that fight. Is that going to reflect in his future performance against Chocolatito? That's the question I think a lot of fans have going into this epically sought-after trilogy fight between Juan Francisco Estrada and Arhi Cortez. So, Juan Francisco Estrada has been out of the ring for a while prior to that fight with Arhi Cortez, gets in a tough fight with a fighter that was relatively unknown, but he did come in as a student of Nacho Beristain, so Nacho is not going to mess with no fighters that are not the whole package. And he did pull out that decision win over Arhi Cortez, but he did show signs of, defensive flaws and was getting hit. Now, will this show up in his next fight with Chocolatito? So, I think, we're going to find out soon enough. So, Juan Francisco Estrada ekes out that 12-round decision win over Arhi Cortez, who was very game, by the way. And this opens up the door for that third fight with Chocolatito. And as far as I know, the rumors are going around that they're setting up the date for December 3rd for that trilogy fight. Boxing fans, I want those early tallies. How do you think Juan Francisco Estrada does in that third fight with Chocolatito? In the comments section, let me know, y'all. Let's chop this up. Now, let's move away from Hermosillo. Let's take it to Los Angeles. Crypto.com Arena. PBC Showtime had this big fight card. All kinds of cool little fights were on the fight card. Ruiz Salim got the win over Plania in dominant fashion. Looked a lot better than his last fight. But I want to get into some of the bigger events that happened on that fight card. Actually, the Ruiz Salim fight was a really good fight too. But I want to talk about what happened with Rayo Valenzuela, y'all. Oh my God. So Rayo Valenzuela, his previous fight to this last fight was against Francisco Vargas, and he dispatched him pretty easily in the first round, albeit, El Bandido did have a lot of wear and tear and a bunch of wars with guys like Orlando Salido and Takashi Miura and, Miguel Burchelt leading up to that fight with Rayo Valenzuela. But Rayo Valenzuela did dispatch Francisco Vargas in a round. You got to give him that, I guess. And then, Rayo Valenzuela has this fight on the undercard for the Andy Ruiz Luis Ortiz fight, and Rayo Valenzuela got a last-minute replacement in the form of Edwin De Los Santos, and shocker of shockers, Rayo Valenzuela gets stopped in the third round by Edwin De Los Santos. The referee was like, no, he had seen enough. Rayo Valenzuela did well enough in the first round, but by the second round, it looked like Edwin De Los Santos had figured out his timing. And by the time he figured out his timing, it looked like Rayo Valenzuela didn't really have any other tools left in the bag except to try to slug it out, which is great cannon fodder for fans. But I think when you're developing your record in the game as what many consider to be still a prospect, you don't want to just get into a gunfight like that. But he did. Rayo Valenzuela, where his reflexes and his timing has gotten through lesser opponents, did not have that same luck with Edwin De Los Santos. Edwin De Los Santos coming into this fight was relatively unheralded, a Dominican fighter. He was 14-1 with 14 knockouts. So he had knockout power coming into this now. I don't know if this was a matchmaker error, but it seemed like once Edwin De Los Santos figured out Rayo Valenzuela's timing, that was all she wrote. And I'm sure the matchmakers were looking back like, what? Oh, the bag, because Rayo Valenzuela did indeed have himself quite a bit of, what's the term? Hype, I guess is the word. He was developing quite a bit of a following, of a cult following in the streets. You know, if you look at my comment sections on the videos that I've done in the past on TikTok on Rayo, they were hailing him as the truth. You know, that he would steamroll guys like, you know, so prior to this loss to Edwin De Los Santos, Rayo Valenzuela was seen as a guy that would steamroll through guys like Rolly Romero and Ryan Garcia. And no doubt that narrative is probably a bit changed after this loss to Edwin De Los Santos. So does Rayo Valenzuela still have that high ceiling that a lot of his diehard fans thought he had prior to this loss to Edwin De Los Santos? You tell me. That's the second loss in a row for the Jose Benavidez senior camp. They've still got David Benavidez riding on the undefeated train, but, you know, we just recently saw Jose Benavidez Jr. lose to Danny Garcia. Now we've got Rayo Valenzuela getting the third round stoppage. You know, they still got David Benavidez Jr. still doing very well, or David Benavidez still doing very well, and Diego Pacheco. So, you know, not all is lost, you guys, just because a fighter or two loses in a specific camp. That doesn't take away from Jose Benavidez Sr.'s accomplishments, but they've definitely got some work to do, I think, with Rayo to try to figure out his defensive liabilities. So, excuse me, Rayo Valenzuela gets that third round loss. So, it was quite a shock. I'm not going to lie. I was watching it as it happened, and it broke down live at Crypto.com via the pay-per-view I ordered, and I was quite shocked. A lot of people were. I instantly got on Twitter. I got behind the camera, made a quick TikTok video, and people's minds were blown. Nobody knew who Edwin De Los Santos was. So Rayo Valenzuela gets stopped, shockingly, by Edwin De Los Santos, who was a last-minute replacement. The Dominican Republic has been going hard lately in boxing. You got Albert Puello, you got Hector Luis Garcia, both who just won titles for the DR. You got Edwin De Los Santos coming out of nowhere as a last-minute replacement, stopping Rayo Valenzuela. Big ups to the Dominican Republic, because I know those boxing fans there are loving what's going on in boxing right now. But, yeah. Let's see what Edwin De Los Santos, what kind of moves he makes in the future, because he's now officially on the radar. Rayo Valenzuela is still a hot name in the division. I don't know what's next for Rayo Valenzuela, folks. Prior to this, Rayo Valenzuela was seen as a very dangerous knockout artist, although he did have some defensive liabilities. What's Rayo Valenzuela's next move after this loss to Edwin De Los Santos? Does he rematch Edwin De Los Santos? Does he move on from De Los Santos and fight somebody like Rolly? You tell me. So, lots of possibilities there. You got to love these new young generation of fighters because they're in each other's faces all day on social media. So, the instant they catch an L, there is no mercy on them. There is no mercy on them. And it's a tough path to follow because it's something that fighters in the past that didn't have the social media era to contend with never really had to deal with. But it's fascinating. So, PitBull Cruz. Ooh, okay. So, we're done talking about Rayo Valenzuela. Let's move on to Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz got the second round highlight reel knockout stoppage over Eduardo Ramirez, a.k.a. Zurdito. and the fans in Crypto.com arena went nuts. Clearly, Isaac Cruz is a fan favorite, especially in Southern California. So, who knows what's next for Isaac Cruz? With that win over Zurdito Ramirez, Isaac Cruz moves up. I think he's the number 3 position right now in the WBC. So, you've got Ryan Garcia ahead of him at the number 2 spot. Okay, hold on. Yes, okay, if I'm mistaken, okay. So Isaac Cruz right now in the WBC rankings is ranked 3rd. Above him, you've got Ryan Garcia in the 2nd position. In the number 1 position, you got Vasily Lomachenko. So Lomachenko is already tied up in that fight with Jermaine Ortiz upcoming. Ryan Garcia supposedly is in the midst of negotiations with Tank Davis. Who knows what the deal is with that? But Isaac Cruz, after that recent knockout, said he wants that rematch with Tank Davis. If not, I guess he'll settle for trying to get a fight with Devin Haney. But Devin Haney's wrapped up with Kambosos. So what's next for Isaac Cruz? You tell me. Now, he's got a lot of potential opportunities. I think he's got the big payday with Tank Davis, but he would be Isaac Cruz after that recent knockout. I think he's shown himself to be a fan favorite. I think he would pack an arena in Los Angeles or even San Diego. Shoot, throw him anywhere in the southwest region of the United States. Stick him in there with Rolly Romero. Stick him in there with Rayo Valenzuela. Stick him in there with Ryan Garcia. Fans want to see it. Shoot, give him Frank Martin. Let's get it cracking in the lightweight division. Put Isaac Cruz in there with all of them. I want to see it. So, anyways, folks, we're going to move on from the Isaac Cruz thing. Let's talk about the main event. Andy Ruiz Jr. gets a hard-fought 12-round unanimous decision win over a very game Luis Ortiz. Now, it was kind of an anticlimactic fight. There were spurts where there was a lot of action, especially early in the fight. Andy Ruiz got 2 knockdowns in the second round. Luis Ortiz gained his composure in that second round after getting knocked down and managed to make the second round still highly competitive despite getting knocked down twice in that round. And then Andy Ruiz knocked down King Kong in the 7th round also. So there was 3 knockdowns in a fight that you could start to hear crowd. There were portions of the fight where the action got so slow that the crowd started booing. But regardless, a fight is a fight. You're there to win, not to impress the fans. Andy Ruiz Jr. looking effective at his weight. He's back. I think he came into the fight at 260 pounds, if I'm not mistaken, or he's roughly around his normal fight weight. In his fight with Chris Arreola, he came in underweight, and it looked like it affected his punch resistance and the power of his punches because he didn't have as much weight behind the punch, but that was not the issue this time. Every time they would get into heavy exchanges, it looked like he was getting the better of Luis Ortiz. Justifiably so. Both Andy Ruiz and Luis Ortiz are heavy hitters. So, Andy Ruiz gets the unanimous decision win over Luis Ortiz. What's next for Andy Ruiz Jr.? There's a lot of whisperings about him possibly fighting Deontay Wilder should Deontay Wilder beat Robert Helenius. And I think that would probably be the best matchup for Andy Ruiz Jr. Boxing community. You tell me. You tell me. Andy Ruiz Jr. gets the win over Luis Ortiz. Do boxing fans want to see him fight Deontay Wilder should Deontay Wilder beat Robert Helenius in his upcoming fight? You tell me in the comments section. If not Deontay Wilder, then who? All right, y'all. That's going to be it for this video. Leave a comment. Hit that like button if you haven't already done so. Are you not already following me? Anyways, this is Hot Boxing Minute, the future of boxing analysis on YouTube and TikTok. Peace.